Sunilji, but you've been traveling with the armed forces over there, speaking to many of the officers. What are they telling you from the ground? Why do they think so many terror attacks are taking place one after another? Why can't they seem to stop them?
Well, Rahul, there are many aspects to this issue. The foremost, aspect is that after the abrogation of Article 370 and 35A, there was a massive crackdown on terrorism and terror ecosystem in the Kashmir Valley. Funding of the separatists was choked, and as a result of that, law and order issues were also sorted out. Then Pakistan and terrorists changed their strategy. They thought that the best place to strike now is south of Pir Panjal region, particularly the twin border districts of Rajouri and Poonch, because the terrain there suits them. There are, natural caves there which are used as hideouts by these terrorists. And the most important issue, Rahul, here is that the terror handlers which are based in, Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir and in Pakistan, they have been able to reactivate the network of overground workers. And it's because of these overground, terror workers that these terrorists are able to sustain for such a long time in the upper reaches. They are being provided logistics support by these overground workers. Otherwise, without food and water and other support, these terrorists can't sustain for a long time. And Rahul, the recoveries that have been made from the terrorists in Kathua, it clearly shows that these are not fidains, these are not suicide squads. They are coming for a long haul. They want to create mayhem in Jammu and Kashmir. They want to attack the security forces. They want to attack non-combatants and then go to their hideouts.
Okay, and they also seem to be skilled terrorists. It's not as if these are
absolutely
poorly trained terrorists. They're coming in, they seem to have training because they can stage an attack and then disappear into the jungles. SP Vaid, you've been Director General Police of Jammu and Kashmir. From your reading, we heard from General Hasnain. In your understanding, what's the message the terrorists are sending soon after this government is sworn in for a third time? 4 attacks back to back. What do you think is at play, Mr. Vaid?
Good evening, Rahul. I think the message is very clear. It's testing the new government. It's a message to the third cabinet, which was sworn in Mr. Modi, that we are here. Don't think that we are not there. We can strike at will wherever we want. And that's why they have chosen Jammu region. Jammu region, I'll come to that point why they are choosing Jammu. The message is also to counter the narrative of return to normalcy after abrogation of Article 370. This is what you are seeing in Rajouri Poonch in last 1.5 years is to counter the narrative which BJP and the ruling establishment that we are going for a development push after abrogation of Article 370. That's why they were targeted, if you recall, they targeted the laborers, they targeted the Kashmiri Pandits, outsiders. Don't dare outsiders to come to Kashmir. It's also to counter these. So I think the biggest message which they are conveying that let's see how the new government, which they were expecting that Mr. Modi would be in a weaker wicket, which he is not. They are mistaken. But I think they are testing the new government. That is the you saw how the first attack, which was in reasi, timed to that swearing-in ceremony.
I want to come now to the second part of this conversation. How should India respond? The Prime Minister, Sushant Sareen, is at the G7 summit. Last time we sent the special forces in after the Uri attack. They crossed the line of control. Then we used the Air Force in the Balakot airstrikes. Has the threshold been breached already? We know Prime Minister Modi, his national security team, Ajit Doval, being given another opportunity, be NSA, Home Minister Amit Shah, they all met this afternoon before the Prime Minister left to discuss the situation and what to do next. From your prism, is it time for Balakot 2.0?
So, Rahul, you know, the threshold, if you have over 300 seats in parliament, is one. And the threshold, if you have 240 seats in parliament,
why
is a lot.
Why should the strength in parliament determine the threshold, Sushant?
I'll tell you why. Because it kind of forces your hand that you can't afford to be seen weak. You can afford to ignore certain things if you have a very solid majority. You cannot, especially after the kind of election campaigning you have done on this particular issue.
So you're saying the threshold has actually come down?
I would imagine so. And I would be...
How do you define the threshold? Is reasi a threshold? 5 soldiers, 2 terrorists killed. What is the threshold? Like if you look at the various attacks, 7 terrorists killed in January. In November, 5 soldiers killed. 5 terrorists trigger an IED blast. What's the threshold? There have been so many attacks. You join them together, it's a very big number.
It is a very big number, and that is why at this point in time, given the fact that you've had attacks back to back, I would imagine if I was a Pakistani, I would be extremely terrified because of Mr. Modi's silence. Normally what happens is when attacks take place, you have the Prime Minister condemning it, saying something. He's not uttered a word. Last 4 days, he hasn't uttered a single word on this issue. And if I was having known a little bit about the guy, having seen him operate over the last 10 years, his silence is terrifying. And frankly, I'm not entirely sure that this is going to go unpunished. Now, what is the form of the retaliation that will take place, whether it will be along the line of control, whether it will be in some other sector, whether it will be by air, by sea, by land, I don't know. I think everybody will be guessing.
So your sense is the threshold has already been breached, that India is getting ready for a response. That's what you're saying, Sushant?
I'm actually surprised because if you let this pass, then you are opening yourself up to a lot more such attacks. So I think there will be some retaliation. But at the end of the day, I think this is a problem that we'll have to keep, we'll have to keep mowing the grass.
General Hasnain, how would you define the threshold? What do you think needs to be done to punish Pakistan? Is it more sensible for India to begin a Sarp-Vinash 2.0, send forces in the upper reaches, try and find where these terrorists are hiding in the Jammu region, first try and neutralize them? Or should we go and teach their masters a lesson?
See, Rahul, this has to be very comprehensively addressed. I tend to agree with a lot what Sushant has just said. But then thresholds are not defined by single horizontal lines on a graph. These are very, very fuzzy lines, and each of us will have a different perception of it. So I don't think it's an easy job for any of us to say...
Do you think the threshold has already been crossed, or do you think it's not there yet?
You see, when you look at it in perspective, there is a successful election behind us. There is another election about to come, which has been laid down. 30th of September should be carried out. Before that, the Honorable Supreme Court has already laid it down. So the preparations for that have to begin. Obviously, we need to be extremely circumspect about it, that this kind of a thing is going to be repeated then. Perhaps the Pakistanis are now ruining the fact that they didn't do enough to upset the Lok Sabha elections in Jammu and Kashmir.
So I just want to come back to the question I posed to you. In the latest series of attacks that we've seen, has the Indian threshold for response, according to you, already been breached?
I think it has been crossed. I think it has been crossed.
So you're saying the threshold has already been crossed?
It's not necessary. But what happens and what you respond with is a calibrated thing. You see, what the Prime Minister has said and what the media has reported is very clear, that full spectrum, go ahead with a full spectrum response. Now, full spectrum has many meanings, just like as we speak about threshold. First, we'll need to look at the internal part, and your question on Sarp-Vinash, I shall answer there. We have to secure ourselves very strongly. I agree with Gaurav that there are some gaps here. You need additional troops. Amarnath Yatra is coming up. Every year, additional troops are brought for Amarnath Yatra. We need to secure the Amarnath Yatra from the other side also. Otherwise, you normally secure it only in the valley. You need to secure it from the Pir Panjal, the other side of Pir Panjal, the Warwan Valley, and places like that also. Those are the areas from where it can be struck. So additional troops are definitely required. Whether we need a Sarp-Vinash, well, I do think this is a time has come when you need to do robust offensive operations. Jungle bashing is the last thing any senior commander will ever recommend to you. But when the threshold has been crossed, as we are all assessing here, then you may not get any results, but you have to do it. This happened in 1999 when the valley was flush with terrorists, if you remember. 6 mountain dip from Bareilly was brought in to secure the Amarnath Yatra, stayed on through the year, carried out deep operations into Rafiabad and Rajwar and places like that, and upset the entire apple cart of the infrastructure which the terrorists have put up. So something like that needs to be repeated once again. My last point to you, something which most people may not be aware of, but I would just like to throw it in as a point of discussion later stages. This Jammu region is very fuzzy in terms of boundaries. You remember the Northern Command boundary was changed. I'm sure you remember it. I'm sure Gaurav remembers it. The Northern Command boundary was changed way back in 2004, 2005. Right? Thereafter, this area was not too active. 2008 onwards, it's not been very active. Now, you've got an awkward situation where Western Command and Northern Command are both looking at this area. 9 Corps and 16 Corps are both looking at this area. In these kind of situations, you need one formation, one commander, one intelligence grid to look after this.
That's a very important point. You can't have multiple layers of authority. It simply leads to everyone just looking behind, hoping the other guy does the job.